call to order the meeting of the directors of the New York Convention Center Development Corporation for Friday the 13th, 2017. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask any questions at any time. Please note that we welcome any public comment on the items to ensure maximum opportunity for participation. Speakers representing themselves may speak for up to 2 minutes each, and those representing groups may speak for up to 4 minutes with one speaker per group. Speakers' comments may address only the items considered at today's meeting. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time, and then we'll be sure that you may recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Hearing none, we will move on. The next order of business is Sarah, our president, will present her president's report. This item is being presented for information only, and no vote will be required. Please,
Thank
Sarah.
you very much, Henry. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for coming. And on a housekeeping note, we did issue a board schedule of board meetings for the year, which includes a monthly meeting minus the August meeting. And I apologize because we are in January juggling a few different early construction items that are very time sensitive. So that's why we're having a board meeting today. We will not hold one next week because we don't want to burden everyone's schedules. We will hold one at the end of the month. The date will probably be the 25th, but Debbie's going to pull for that. And I wanted to wait until after this meeting and to make sure before we pull and then risk having to change it again. But that'll be what January looks like, and then we will work very hard to stick to the schedule that we've laid out in the months ahead of us. And like Henry said, I hear everybody on the board materials and agree with everybody, and we will cancel a meeting if we don't get materials out to everybody 24 hours beforehand. So with that, we have a very quick agenda today, but I wanted to just start with the update on the early work, which is a great end to 2016 on the Javits campus. We have 4 of the 6 caissons complete already. We're finishing the 5th, and the 6th caisson for the transformer building will be done at the end of the month. So things are on schedule, on budget, and we feel great about where we are on that. And with regard to the design build process, we also are in a great position, I think. We're getting very close. We will come back to the board at the end of the month. And today, I want to just introduce, before we go into the first board item, we have Karen Ray, who I've mentioned. She's on video conference with Danny Friedman. Karen is a senior expert in design build, has done this, as I've mentioned to you all a couple of times. She's done this in other states around the country and also played a very key role in the Tappan Zee Bridge. And has led the procurement for this project and is going to cover the process, as you heard in a briefing earlier last year. We also have Elise, who is our integrity monitor. She's been by our side through this process, and with her firm K2 Intelligence, you probably remember approving that contract. She's been also a really critical part of keeping us all in the right place. I'm trying to see if there's, and Danny Friedman, I should not overlook, has done a tremendous amount of work with Karen up in Albany and down here as well. I think that's all I wanted to cover before we go into the items themselves.
Okay, thank you. There's an item for consideration, a request for authorization for the corporation to approve a capital improvement project in the New York Convention Center renovation funding agreement. Sarah?
Thank you. So as you may recall, at the end of 2015, we came to the board to seek approval to enter into a funding agreement with CCOC. And the rationale there is there are a number of capital improvement projects that need to be done, should be done on the Javits campus that CCOC is best positioned to oversee and move forward. They have folks on site, on staff that can oversee these. And CCDC, being the organization that's responsible for paying for those capital improvements, would then acknowledge the need for it, approve it, and then reimburse them for the cost. When we came to the board, we also, I think, had the beginning of a list. It wasn't an exhaustive list. It was our first guess of what we might need to do. The Eastern Egress is one of those projects that Alan is advancing with his team. And the project that we are coming today with is an addition. It is a new truck check-in location on 12th Avenue. And again, I think I did talk about this in my president's report a couple of months back. We feel that this is critical for a couple of reasons. One is that the old truck check-in location is right underneath where the transformer building is going. So there was a need to move it out of the way. And then more importantly, from a safety standpoint, this allows the truckers to check in, show their identification before the truck actually goes onto the Javits campus. So if for some reason that trucker, we didn't want to allow her, Alan's team felt that he needed to provide further information, the truck would not be on premises already. So all in all, the total project cost is $780,000 that we're looking to approve. With that, I will turn to the vote.
Any questions or comments?
I do have a picture that I'm going to send around that Alan brought that just shows a comment. One more thing here is the truck check-in locations. There are two spaces that in the original IMPay design were meant for retail use, and they've never been activated. They're part of the original building, and they're a perfect way to repurpose them is to have a truck check-in spot there.
David, you have a question?
I just want to say I completely agree with your comments on the timing. I personally haven't had time to read the material. I'm going to vote in favor of both items solely on the basis of the staff recommendation without any deep understanding of what's in the material. I strongly object to this way of running the business of this entity.
Okay, any other comments or?
Just general question?
Yes.
So this is actually off-street, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's. I mean, I think sending around pictures at the board meeting it's not right. It has to be done in advance.
So I, for the record, I will note that all of the directors were nodding when you said what you said. So I don't think there's any disagreement that we strongly object to being asked to approve something or vote on something that is presented in the middle of the night.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And I think we're all in agreement of that. In order to sort of mitigate a concern, not alleviate it by any means, in order to mitigate it, maybe Mr. Steele will opine a little bit and talk about, because it really came from the operating entity as to why this is important, and maybe you can give us a little bit of background on this.
Sure. It's a combination of projects in the end, because we have been working with FEMA ever since Sandy to secure the western perimeter of the building against flood egress, and these spaces were areas that we were already under contract with FEMA to change by adding floodgates. So as we became aware of the fact that we needed to have the truck check-in area moved because of the truck marshalling yard, and also because our security concerns now are somewhat heightened than they were when the truck check-in procedure was originally initiated back in 1986. A combination of things kind of led us to this conclusion, and we needed to move quickly in order to avoid any delay in the transformer yard. We also needed to make sure we had truck and check-in stations available for the beginning of this year so that the business was not interrupted. And then we also had to tie it in with the end of 2016, which is when the FEMA grant that had been approved would have expired if we had not had the work completed by then. So a combination of those things led to the acceleration and the timing of the project. As I said, as we've said, it's been completed on time. It's operating this week and has been operating very successfully. And so on all levels, whether it be from flood protection or security, or for convenience of truck check-in, it's been a good project to have initiated and completed.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay, any other questions? If not, could we have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Karen Ray, who is on the screen, is going to present the last item on today's agenda, a request for ratification of the design-build procurement approach. Karen, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chairman and board members. Basically, I'm going to basically be just at a very high level reviewing the process. I have to reinforce that we are still in an active procurement and an ongoing procurement, so it's a restricted period, so communications about the actual process that's underway and being protected for the integrity of the process will not be subject to today. This is something we committed to do to come back to you. When I talked with most of you just in offline, and Sarah's been, I know, bringing you up to speed on where we're going. So this is just trying to bring it all together, and I'll defer to the legal folks about exactly what we're asking, but more it's for your information about how we're using the design-build legislation and best practices in the state of New York that have been created since 2011 when the first design-build language was passed. So just in quick summary, I don't need to go into the project background. You all know very well what the project is. We're moving forward here. If I have any questions, I imagine Alan can jump in and help remind us, as well as Sarah. But given the scope and complexity of this project and its huge cost, the desire was to achieve maximum efficiencies and savings, as we have in other projects throughout the state, saving the state of New York approximately $2 billion in the first 5 years of design build. So that's why we moved to use design build, and I think your board agreed that design build and helping expedite delivery of this project is a very big positive. So we assembled a team of experts. Needless to say, CCDC does not have a huge staff. It has a staff of one. So we use the resources available at the state level and through contracts that you've procured to develop a cadre of people that could come together and create the documents that were bid out, and then in turn a different set or supplemented people be able to review them. So I just wanted to go through that process. Again, this is a process that we would use if another ESD project came forward that was a pure construction project. I think this is kind of what's turning into a standard general approach across New York State. The team does include ESD staff, CCD staff, Convention Center operations staff. We also tapped agencies such as OGS and DASNY, who build buildings in the state, as well as DOT, who's done the most design-build projects, as well as, again, outside experts that have extensive experience. And that's a standard practice. We used it on the Tappan Zee. We had over 90 people in that particular procurement that were involved in helping do the reviews and work to create the document. We have spent a great deal of time, some would say extraordinary amount, securing the confidentiality of the agreements. In all of the procurements that I have been involved in, and the state is now using non-disclosure agreements, conflict of interest agreements, with a lot of help. I want to call out Goldie, because in this particular case it was very important. We've taken a lot of strength and time and effort making sure, and the integrity monitor being added, that the information was secured and only viewed in a secure site. It wasn't even moved around in this case, and in many cases electronically. We did not in the Tappan Zee, for instance. Everything was done in a secured facility. We sequestered people so there was no leak and no influence outside of the technical folks that were involved. Since the design-build method is a new project delivery to CCDC and relatively new to ESD since it just passed last April, this is really, today was just to kind of highlight the key parts of how a design-build procurement works. As you all know, in April of 2016, only 9 months ago, New York passed the Transformational Economic Development and Infrastructure Revitalization Projects, a Design-Build Act for 2 Empire State Development projects, and of course this is clearly one of them. This is a 2-step process. One where you first go in and do an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications to get qualified teams that are going to come in and bid on this work. It is different than the traditional where you'd go out and hire designers and then they design and then you give the designers and you bid that out to contractors. This combines those two efforts and reduces the risks that often assimilate between the two. So we issued an RFQ soliciting qualifications and firms and teams that would be interested in this project. And that's the standard practice to do a first phase where you call out a high quality qualified teams. The second step in any process that's design build is then to move and those qualified teams become or receive a request for proposals, which is technical and financial in nature. Those I'll talk a little bit about later. Those are split, the technical being kept totally separate from the financial and the pricing, because it's important that you have those conversations separately so they're not biasing the outcome. So we also did the other best practice that has evolved in New York State, especially on mega projects, is the use of something we call individual meetings, where instead of waiting till after you're until you're negotiating a contract, you have a lot of conversations that are very carefully scripted and managed up front so you can make adjustments in the bid procurement, because there's always things we can learn from the private sector and the private sector learns from us. It's all handled in a way that everybody has equal information at the end unless it's proprietary. And we've used that extensively at DOT and the Thruway and at some other projects in the state. So we've brought that kind of thinking into this process to allow those meetings to occur. Again, all information flowing in and out of this process has been done through the secured project sites. We can literally tell you who was in and who saw what document at any minute of time. So that's the level of security that we've put on the process. The general view is that then a technical review team looks at things from design to schedule to project plans to MWBE to team experience. And that's usually a very hefty effort because you're looking at something that is basically fairly new, a 30% design level that comes in as part of the proposal. There's also a separate proposal that has pricing, which we have, in the case of Tappan Zee, kept in two different cities because we wanted to keep that separation, and we're following that practice of keeping two separate locations in all the design build that are going forward in the state right now. So the technical review gets done separately and totally is not biased by the price. Later, a price is entered in, and then a selection panel does a trade-off about the technical and the price and what creates the best value determination. At the point that exhaustive effort is completed, it then ends up coming back to the governing body, in this case CCDC, with a full write-up of those recommendations for your action to approve or not the selection recommendation that comes forward to you, or the selection that comes forward to you. And again, I'm the whole team will tell you that I've been very, very much in light of, just being careful that across 30 years I've watched a lot of things go sideways. The fact that we are in a restricted period is why we can't talk more about this particular procurement, but you will have all the information before you're asked to act on actually executing or approving a contract. So I hope that's a broad process overview. We've taken most of that from existing best practices that have passed state controller reviews, which is important because that's part of our project too, and tried to develop that all and spent many, many hours ensuring the integrity to get to this point. We will look forward to being back to you shortly with the outcome of that process.
Okay, any questions? I know I have some, but I would welcome anyone else to respond to Karen first. Okay, if not, I'm curious as to why we're not doing this the way everybody in the private sector does do it, which is you do have your various professionals, architects and so forth, do plans and specs. You reconcile those with the structural engineer and the MEP and all the other trades. You then go out to bid, and you either accept the lowest bid or you accept the lowest qualified bid. But under this process, you can't tell us today what the budget's going to be, and therefore you can't tell us whether we are going to have the inevitable overrun that usually accompanies design build, because if there's no budget, there can't be an overrun. So as fiduciaries and stewards of the public's money, how do we feel comfortable approving this process?
Can I take a crack, and Karen, you can add to that? So as you remember, in January of last year, before the legislation was passed for design build, the governor, we talked about the delivery method, and we embarked on design build because of the feeling that you can contain costs within a fixed price. So when we come to the board with a contract, it will be with a fixed price attached, with the understanding that we have to stay within that fixed price.
Well, it'll be within the fixed price that the design build firm gives you.
That's right.
So it's not our budget, it's their budget, which will build in significant contingencies. Do you intend to have the design build company contractor bond, either through SubGuard or otherwise, their performance and as well as the subs?
We're not.
Are we going to have
I
payment
can't-
or performance bonds?
I can't answer that right now. That's part of the ongoing procurement. I apologize.
So here today, we're
That
just
will be
talking about the
detailed. That will be
process.
detailed to you. It's followed all finance law and the design build law, and it will meet the standards that will pass the state controller's review, which is a very high standard for meeting the particular issue you just raised. I will say, Chairman, on a broader issue of design build, because I had the honor of working on the first one in 2011. It's not the fix for all projects. It's a fix for projects that are very complex, have a lot of integration, and have a lot of issues where design, construction, and in particular operations are all interfaced. And in this case, and I'm looking at Alan right now, the importance of making sure that that integration occurs, and that the risk that occurs when there's problems between any of those is reduced and borne in much larger part by the contractor in a design build setting than it is in a traditional design bid build setting.
Okay, any other questions or comments, David?
I'd like to say I think your comment, I agree with your comment. I also just like to remind the team in Albany or wherever you are that there is a committee which is expecting to review the program and design in advance of the presentation of the recommendation to the board. I see the other committee members nodding, and so I'd appreciate your confirmation that that will happen, and they will have an opportunity to review the program and design before it's presented to the full board.
We will work with you to make sure that we get the board appropriate information and don't compromise the integrity of procurement, because those are the two pieces
That's not what I
that we
said.
want to honor.
I said we have a committee. That's an agreed upon process.
I heard you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't hear your answer though. I need to
We
know
will
is that
work with
are
the
you committing to
subcommittee.
do that?
We will work with the subcommittee to
And it
make
will
sure that
happen?
we get whatever information we can without compromising the procurement.
That's so. In other words, you don't agree to it. You're not willing to say that you will present it to the committee because you're saying only what we can. That's not. I mean, what's the secret here? Why can't you just say yes?
There's no secret. It's truly respecting the process in ensuring that we have integrity in the process.
I understand that, but you know what we need, and we know what your process is. I just like to hear from you that what the committee has asked for, the chairman has asked for, the committee has set up and asked for. Yes or no, are we going to have that? If the answer is no, then I'd like to hear that now rather than later, because if the answer is no, okay, you can at least, let's hear that, and then we'll see whether we can work around it. If the answer is yes, there's no problem, but it's got to be one or the other, guys. Yes or no?
There's two totally separate issues here. The integrity of the process is really financial protection, that bidders don't know what other bidders are bidding on or what they're willing to do it for. What David, as the chairman of the committee, is asking for is here's what we're planning on building, here's what it looks like, here's the program.
Yeah.
Alan could make that presentation, to be quite honest. It's not, we're really talking across each other because it's apples and
Yeah,
oranges.
so again, I mean, I'm not trying to be cheeky about it. I think we're going to work with you and make sure that we can get together. So let's plan to do that. Let's plan to get together in short order.
I'm a little confused. Why would we have set up the committee if the committee was not going to actually receive the information
I'm trying to
that
know.
serves the purpose? I'm assuming that setting up the committee is not in violation of any of the procurement policies? If it,
So I think it was beneficial. I mean, the committee met to go over what the program requirements are and what the design specifications are. So to understand really what does this project entail? What are the key components of it? And how have we presented that to the bidding community? And I think the committee got comfortable with this and with the understanding that Alan and CCOC were getting, I mean, one big concern is, well, are you building what the operator needs? Is this actually going to be the right expansion project? And we spent a lot of time on that, and I think got comfortable that, I don't want to speak for the committee, but got comfortable we were heading in that direction. I think David's point is valid. Now that we are where we are, he wants to have, and I think from our perspective that, it's only beneficial for board members to be on board. And I think we should work towards that and figure out, it's just a sequencing question. So let's.
Sarah, when we formed this subcommittee and I was here, I certainly agreed with you on the first part, whether we're building something that we actually need the operating people. But I was also under the impression that, this was sort of a committee that had a particular expertise and was going to take a lot of extra time to look at all the fine details and sort of give their imprimatur before it came to the full committee. So I thought it had a purpose inclusive of what you said, but also what David's saying. And I guess my question is this subcommittee, which I thought was going to look at these details before we would and sort of vet them through, am I under am I misunderstanding this?
Thank you, George. By the way, I agree with you completely. And it is what the operator needs, but also what the city needs and what the...
If I may just put a fine point on it. And thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. Although the undertone of it does seem to imply that there is certain information that is being withheld from the board. And I understand the concept of providing certain protections to protect the fiscal integrity of the project and to protect confidentiality. But presumably the board has fiduciary obligations, and we have certain governance requirements, both in law and in practice. And there should be no information that perhaps outside the context of an open meeting that should be withheld from the board, even during an open procurement. And consistent with both city and state procurement law, there is an ability to read in or make an advisor to a project anyone with subject matter expertise, and presumably that would include board members. So I'm a little confused as to why there would be sort of a cloak on some information even up until. I do get that we're approving a process, but when it comes to the point in time where there are recommendations, I do think that there is some value to allowing the subcommittee to see some of the underlying information to verify the integrity of the conclusions.
Absolutely.
I have a very specific question. Are you under the opinion that this subcommittee process that this board has agreed to undertake is in violation of any ethics code in New York or any processes?
First of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to opine on that. I'm only part of this process because I've got extensive design build experience, including in the state of New York. So
But you're opining as to whether it's
I'm
appropriate
opining
for
on
some-
there's an integrity process. We have an integrity monitor in the room, and this particular agenda item is intended to be the first step, which is an overview of the process, including a sense. The integration with the board, I defer to Sarah and to the chairman, We will
Are
work
you saying
through
that
the
this
issue.
subcommittee is antithetical to this integrity process?
George, I think in setting this up, we we want to be responsive to the board. We want to be as open and transparent. There's no cloak here. I think so. Therefore, when the committee was set up, I think David was right in championing it. I think the chairman was supportive of it. We had not thought through the integration between and the sequencing of the committee and the.
I think that's a perfect answer. We haven't thought about it. Maybe I'm misreading it. I'm almost getting the opinion that there is a belief that having this subcommittee of trustees look at this thing is contrary to proper ethics or integrity. And maybe I'm being hypersensitive here, but I voted for the subcommittee. I think it's wonderful. I trust everyone on it, and I thought it'd be helpful to the process. And if the answer is I don't know, and we'll talk about it, that's okay. But I want people to speak with specificity on this,
Sure.
especially when we're talking to matters, because we're throwing the word integrity out there kind of freely, and I'm bristled by it.
So why don't we do this? I think we should come back to the board in short order in the next few days, and we will have a plan with the subcommittee in the next week or so, and we can more clearly articulate that. I think in prepping for today's meeting, we were really focused on giving clarity and transparency to what's happened over the last year and the steps that have been involved with the procurement process. But clearly, we want to do a little bit more work around this and the board interface, and we will do that.
Okay. Any other questions? Excuse me. Okay, if there are no other questions from the board or any comments from the public, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Okay, so thank you. We will then take a motion for adjournment. Thanks for coming, and could we have a motion, please? Thank you very much.